We're good? Okay. This is the regular monthly Woodbridge Board of Finance meeting for Thursday, April 19th, 2018. And it almost seems like we haven't met in about 6 months, but I guess it's a month or so? I don't know. It seems an awful long time, but in my world, everything seems like a long time. So, okay, the first item on the agenda is public comments, and I don't see anyone. So we'll move to item 2, which is a review of the July 1st, 2017 Actuarial Valuation, the OPEB report, and with us tonight is Steven Lemanski from Hooker and Holcombe to go over this for us. Okay, Steve?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'd like to thank the board for inviting me here today. I think it's the first time I'm in front of you. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a consulting actuary with Hooker and Holcombe in West Hartford. Been in the profession about 30 years and spend about 90% of my time these days in the public sector. So talking to boards like yourself, OPEB, pension, everything to do with public sector retirement benefits. So you should have a presentation in front of you, hard copy. I think you might have gotten in advance as well. So I'd like to use this as a guide. I'd be happy to go over any details of the report itself, although the key numbers are in this presentation. So just to kick it off, slide 2, came up with a little agenda, just the talking points for tonight. So I'm going to talk just briefly about the valuation as a reminder of what it's all about, why we do this. A little bit about the numbers, of course, go over the data, and touch on financial reporting under GASB 74 and 75. So again, we're talking about retiree medical benefits, purpose of the valuation on page 3. And I think it's important to remember that the valuation itself, in terms of the cost of the plan, it's not changing the cost of the plan, the valuation. We're just measuring the liabilities. The ultimate cost of the plan, I like to think of it as money going into the trust. At the end of the day, over the life of the plan, has to equal money going out of the trust. So money coming into the trust, of course, town contributions, you're financing those benefits. Money going out are the actual benefits being paid out to retirees, if you're paying any administrative expenses and so forth. So that's that basic equation, if you will, in the box in the middle of this page. The valuation itself does not change that equation. You can think of the valuation when we come to the town and say, here's the actual contribution this year. It's really this year's allocation of that long-term cost. Okay, so think of it as a budgeting tool. All right. So slide 4 is some basic points from the valuation. And we'll go over the numbers in a minute, but as far as the breakdown of the liability, where do the numbers fall? If you look at three main groups, so you've got police, your town groups, and Board of Ed. And so police, about 40% of the liability is with that group, 35% with the town, 25% with the Board of Ed. Some changes that we're picking up to this valuation in terms of the numbers. Okay, all groups are now covered by a high deductible plan with an HSA as active members. That's been a very common trend in the public sector over the last several years. That is going to result in lower costs long term. We have picked up or reflected the funding of 65% of the deductible for the police and town groups. That's to be effective July 1st this year, currently 75%. You have taken some steps to manage the liability. Okay, so have the groups here with the effective dates for new hires, police, town, non-union, and AFSCME, who have been who are new hires in recent years and going forward are not eligible for retiree health coverage. And again, that's a common change as municipalities try to manage these liabilities and costs. Okay. So we picked that up. Have made some assumption changes. These are really what I would consider routine changes. We make lots of assumptions about the future. We're trying to predict what's going to happen with respect to healthcare costs. We're trying to predict how long people are going to live. Try to predict retirement patterns and so forth. Some of those details come out of the state teachers valuation. They do studies periodically on the Board of Ed side, kind of how those groups kind of travel through their career, retire, and what their longevity is. We map some of those things into this valuation. We made some adjustments to how medical costs are expected to trend going forward. The last point on this page, again, we'll go over the numbers in a second, what we call the funded ratio, which are the assets against the liabilities. You've funded about 19, almost 20% of the liability. And you know, I think it's important to step back. Less than a decade ago, most municipalities had nothing set aside because the GASB requirements were brand new at that time. Believe it or not, about 60% of the municipalities in the state of Connecticut have not set up any trust whatsoever. And
60%?
About 60%. Yeah, only about 40% of the municipalities have any money set aside at all. And of the ones that do, the average funded ratio is still in the single digits. So the fact that you're at 20%, you're way ahead of the curve. You know,
Tony.
It's a long road. You know, these are long-term benefits, so it's time to build up the assets. So key numbers, just a summary of the valuation, a little bit of history is on page 5. The way to read this, the top chart, which is called the schedule of funding progress. Again, the valuations are done biennially. So we have the history here starting from going back to 2011 in this chart. The most recent, of course, is the last line. So as of the valuation date, you had about $3.8 million in assets, first column. Liability of the plan was about $19.7 million. So the difference is what we call the unfunded liability. Think of that as the mortgage of the OPEB plan itself. That's getting paid off over time. So the plan is about 19% funded. And GASB, just a required disclosure, is and it's really a trend indicator indicating as a percentage of covered payroll what is that unfunded liability. Okay, so your unfunded liability is $15.8 million against payroll about 10.3. Okay. The other key numbers, of course, are the actuarially determined employer contribution. So this is, think of this as if you were fully funding this benefit over time from an actuarial perspective, what would the town fund into the trust? So again, we have trend numbers going back to fiscal 15. This valuation developed the last two numbers in this chart. So for fiscal 19, the number is 1.56 million, and fiscal 20, it's 1.57 million. There is an important detail. You don't have to put that much new money into the trust, and I'll talk about why that is in a second. Just kind of going a little bit further down into the weeds in terms of the liabilities and the assets. That's on page 6. So there's the breakdown. This is where I came up with the percentages that we just talked about a few minutes ago. So the liability again is $19.7 million off to the right under the grand total. And because this is accrual accounting, if you will, you have a reserve not only for your existing retirees that are drawing the benefits, but you're accruing liability along the way for your active. So the $19.7 million breaks down into about 6.4 for your current actives and about 13.3, 13.4 for your retirees. All right. And there's the 19.4% funded ratio. Okay. And a little bit more detail on the actuarial contribution on page 7. And I'll start off to the right because the other columns are the breakdown by group. So there's the actuarial contribution of $1.56 million, where it says total ADEC 1819. Now, the way that breaks down, there's a few pieces to that. Kind of the middle, the largest number, the amortization payment, that's the mortgage payment on the unfunded liability. So that's getting paid off over time. So of the $1.56 million, about 1.17 is paying that down. Eventually, as the plan gets funded and the assets get in balance with the liability, that will go away. Okay, but for now, That's part of that number. The normal cost,
Could you just repeat what you just said?
the 1 point,
Just the last two couple.
Yeah.
I blinked and it just said it.
Okay, yeah, so there's an unfunded liability right now in the plan of about, on the previous page, about $15.9 million.
Right.
The difference between the liability of the plan and the assets. So that's getting paid off over time as part of the town's contribution. And so that payment is this amortization amount.
No, you made a comment about when the liability starts to,
Well, when the assets build up to the point where they're in balance with the
Right.
liability, they're equal, there's no more mortgage to pay off.
and what's the time projection on that, given our population?
Right now, it's a 30-year
Okay.
pay down.
That's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
thank you.
It's a long-term proposition. So that's the largest piece right now of the contribution. The normal cost is your current accrual, if you will, for your actives. We're recognizing a cost while they're working. Okay. So for all the employees covered, police, town, Board of Ed, that's about $336,000. We make a timing adjustment because we're doing the valuation ahead of time. We're doing the valuation in 17, but the contribution is not made till 18 or 19, so there's an interest adjustment for that delay. That's how we get to the contribution. Now, down the road, this is not currently happening, but right now the pay-as-you-go costs for retirees are being funded directly or paid directly, if you will. They're not being passed through the trust. Eventually, that will make sense to do that. That's kind of the goal of a trust fund. You're setting aside money to eventually pay the benefits.
Right.
So if you think about what would happen, the pay-as-you-go cost would really be part of the contribution and passed to the trust. We've kind of set that aside right now because it's being paid directly. So only the difference, in other words, the difference between the actual contribution and the current retiree pay-as-you-go cost is considered to be new money funding requirements. So that difference is about $467,000.
And we have 300,000 in our budget.
Right.
That's the, right. So the 1.0088 is what the town and the Board of Ed put in their budget to pay retiree benefits each year.
Right.
To pay them out.
To pay them, right, to actually pay them the insurance bills, right?
And so we've developed that number both for 18-19 and 19-20. You'll notice that the 19-20 funding number is actually a little bit less, and that's because the pay-as-you-go costs are expected to be higher. As medical trend goes up, we have more retirees. Page 8, we call it plan experience. So this is what I consider to be kind of one of the most interesting parts of our job, kind of figuring out why things are different in 17 versus what we thought they were going to be based on the last valuation. Now, with respect to the premium increases that happened since last time, fiscal 17, as you know, was a very challenging year in terms of claims experience and the premium increases that you were faced with. We double-checked with Tony during the valuation process because we did see some pretty healthy increases on the pre-65 premiums. In fact, I understand you changed carriers.
We did.
Part of that negotiation.
Yep.
So there were some actuarial losses, meaning on that piece of the liability, numbers were higher because of the large increases. On the flip side, the post-65 numbers didn't go up as much as we expected them to. So on balance, you actually had what's called a gain. So you had favorable experience on net. The post-65 more than offset the pre-65 to the tune of about $640,000 in liability. The plan change for the Board of Ed, the moving to the HDHP, that resulted in another reduction of about $160,000 in liability for the Board of Ed. And the assumption changes I talked about earlier, on that they moved in another direction. Longer life expectancies, things of that nature. Page 9 is, it's helpful, I think, just to see what your participant counts look like by group, so you can see in total, as of the valuation date, you had 37 police members, 81 town members, 119 Board of Ed certified. Of course, the way the liability breaks out doesn't necessarily translate into these headcounts, because some groups have more generous benefits than others. Some police officers, for example, they tend to retire earlier, draw those benefits over a longer period of time, so per capita those liabilities tend to be higher than other groups. And then we also have some statistics on average age of the population, both actives and retirees. Just want to stop there for a second before I just touch on the financial reporting. Any questions about the valuation?
It's an interesting difference in terms of the retiree age average. I mean, there's almost a 14-year difference between police.
But it kind of makes sense too.
Well, yeah, but as you think about it, but it's, I mean, I never really realized that.
On the financial reporting side, just slide 10. So GASB 43 and 45 has been around for a while. GASB decided that they wanted to map some of the pension accounting changes over to OPEB. Okay, those pension accounting changes happened back in fiscal 14. GASB 74 and 75 are the OPEB equivalent of those changes. So just stepping back a little bit to the previous rules, GASB 43, 45, in terms of what ends up on the town's, in the CAFR as long-term debt on your balance sheet, really up to this point had nothing to do with the funded status of the plan. So it was all about how much was the town funding into, funding towards these benefits relative to that actuarial contribution. So it was just a running total. It started zero, it was incrementally building up to the extent you weren't fully funding that number. That number sat at about 5.56 million at 6/30/17. So again, 5.56 million is what you had on your balance sheet. The unfunded liability of the plan, as we saw, was about 15.9. They're not related in any way. So GASB said, hey, we want them to match. Okay, so that's what GASB 74, 75 is all about. We did the first report at 6/30/17 under those rules. So just as the valuation showed, that unfunded liability is 15.9 million. Now that didn't get booked at 6/30/17. My understanding that adjustment will get booked during fiscal 18 as of July 1/17. So there'll be a transition. I don't know what the auditors are going to call it, but there'll be an adjusting entry, basically go from the old rules to the new rules. Okay. That'll be a balance sheet adjustment. The last bullet point's important. As part of the discount rate that's used to determine that balance sheet liability, what GASB said is, well, we're going to look at, A, are you funding these benefits through a trust? And B, if you are funding the benefits, are you funding it at a level that's basically expected to keep that trust solvent? Okay, so to the extent it's expected to keep the trust solvent over the long term, you can use what we call the full discount rate, which matches the same rate that we use for the valuation, which for your plan is 6.75. If you were in a situation where you were funding it, but it might be at sort of a nominal level, then you would have to use a blended rate. And Tony, I know you recall we did a depletion date projection as part of that analysis last year, and at the $300,000 level, it supported the 6.75. So we kind of had to go through that exercise. In some cases, some plans that we worked on, it was obvious one way or the other which way it was going to fall. But for you, it was fine. So you get to keep that unfunded liability, otherwise it would have been higher in the balance sheet. That's my formal presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
So one thing that I'm not clear about is the 300,000 that we put aside. You talked about that's being used to pay out current benefits. That's not the contribution that we're making to the trust.
No, it's the other way around. The $300,000 that we put aside,
Yeah.
it goes directly into the trust.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, if you look on page 7,
Okay,
the expected benefits part,
yeah,
that's the part that's pays the claims, pays the bills, pays the claims.
okay,
The line below that, the 467, we put 300,000 in, and that's goes directly to the trust.
okay.
So we pay our benefits out of our budget, like he explained.
Right.
We don't pay them out of the
That's what I
trust.
thought.
Yeah,
Okay. And so that's what's enabled the value of the assets to increase
Correct.
so much.
Right.
Is that we just keep adding that money
Right.
and it's accruing the interest.
Right.
Because that's pretty impressive to have really gone from 923,000 in 2011 to 3.8 million
right.
in 2017. And it's really incredible.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yep.
Okay, Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was very clear. Thank you.
Okay. Tony, monthly report.
Okay. Our monthly report is basically, we had a budgetary surplus last month that was 100,000, but it's basically back to pretty much a even budget with no significant surplus projected at the end of the year. A couple things have happened since we last met
Really?
that I'll bring to your attention. One is, we had an assessment appeal that we had to pay part of out of this year. So that'll create a deficit in taxes, probably about $50,000, because we had to credit part of it this year. The second thing that happened is, which was initiated by this board, was to use $50,000 of the surplus from the high school to put towards a reserve for special ed expenses, which is later on in your package.
It's probably a smart idea.
Yeah. And the third item is that the Board of Education surplus has gone up to $190,000 from $167,000. Those are the three items that impacted this report. Since I put this together, we also had the police activity, and so we're currently monitoring that closely with the chief, and we're hopeful that he can cover that within his budget. The overtime related.
Sandy, are you going to talk about why their
Yes.
deficit went up?
So those three items contributed to the loss of the surplus.
Mhm.
Any questions? Or?
It's just, I would put March
Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you.
in the first line.
Yep.
Karen, it should be March.
March.
Okay. Sandy will talk about Woodbridge Board of Ed. Anything else, Tony?
No, that's it.
Okay, funding requests. The first, I think we talked about, is to replace a vehicle within the animal control budget, and we're going to move $26,000 from our contingency to do it. So I'll approve request for funding. I'll make a motion that we approve request for funding 1718-13 in the amount of $26,000.
That's second. I'd like to comment on this. if I
Sure.
could. So we're currently looking into possibly getting a used vehicle.
Mhm.
So it's possible it's not nearly going to cost quite that much.
Okay.
So perhaps a not to exceed
Okay.
26,000 would be more appropriate.
That's
So
what the
then
Board
I
of
think
Selectmen decided.
that's
to
what the
do.
Board of
You amend
Selectmen
that now,
recommended.
second year
Yeah.
amendment.
Yep.
Okay, so I will amend my motion to say that in an amount not to exceed $26,000, we'll move from the contingency fund to animal control.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. The next is a line item transfer to transfer a donation from the Bethwood Baseball League.
So before you go to the
Go
next one,
ahead.
I just want to make a comment.
Yeah.
We had originally had $50,000 that you had suggested that we move out of the budget from
Mhm,
capital.
mhm.
The first was the 26,000 for the animal control vehicle. The second one was going to be $24,000 from the Beecher North Tennis Court repairs. But in light of what happened in the police department in the investigation, the Board of Selectmen has decided to table that until
Just in case.
we can see
We
how
might
our,
need the
what
contingency.
impacts that has, if any, on our contingency fund.
Yeah.
So when was that scheduled to be done? Did they have an idea when they were going to make those repairs?
No, that was not scheduled till July 1, because that's where it was put in the budget.
Right.
We had just picked these two because the vehicle is really in bad shape, and because the tennis courts, we figured could be done before so people can play earlier. But in light of what happened with the, we just figured we'd wait another month and see if any contingency was necessary.
There's a lot, there might be some police overtime.
Right.
You know, related to the
And the other issue for contingency was, if you recall, the fire department had come with a good request for some damaged equipment from the Inwood fire.
Yeah.
And we, this board said to hold off and see if they can find that money in their budget.
Right.
So that's another possibility, some or a portion of, I don't have a final number on that, but, so there is a few things outstanding there.
So let's say the police actually need the funds.
Right.
Then are we not going to fund the Beecher tennis court?
You can either do that, or we can review the capital account, see if there's any other capital projects that maybe you can postpone the transfer from, or you can use contingency from next year. There's a number of ways you can do that.
Okay. Because it's out of the budget, basically.
Right, correct.
It's not there.
It's not being funded in the budget, right? Or you can see what happens and then add it back to the budget if you need the money in the contingency. I don't think you will, but we figured it was just
It was prudent.
prudent to at least wait a month.
Cautious.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, getting back to this line item transfer, again, this is just a formality. We're moving the money from donations to the budget. It's a donation from the Fathers League. So I'll move acceptance of line item transfer 1718-15 in the amount of $3,000.
Second.
Any discussion?
Thank you to the baseball league.
All those in favor? Aye. This is what we just talked about, moving $50,000 from the Amity money that we received to the Woodbridge Board of Education. I'll move acceptance of line item transfer 1718-16 in the amount of $50,000.
Second.
Any discussion on this? No? All those in favor? Aye.
Thank you all for your support of that concept.
Good concept.
And finally, it's both a request for funding and a line item transfer. And this has to, I'm sure, do with the snow and
Yep.
the wonderful winter we just experienced. So I'll move acceptance of, I don't know if we've ever done this before, combination. Funding and line item transfer 1718-17, just to get a flavor. There's a $60,000 contingency request and a $19,500 line item transfer to cover the public works. So again, I'll move acceptance of request for funding and line item transfer 1718-17 in a total amount of $79,500.
Second.
We're through, we think, or we might
Yeah.
get another storm?
I hope that's it.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Flurries
Tell
only.
you,
Right.
we talked about no more snowstorms, and then we have to have a homicide, right?
It was also trees that came down in
Yeah.
those terrible
I would
winds.
imagine it would
Yeah, it wasn't just.
Oh, you're driving around, trees are down everywhere.
Yeah, that was the
Luckily,
part
some of
that
them fell the other way.
And can I just say,
Armageddon.
I just think Public Works has been doing a phenomenal
They did a
job.
good
Yep, they did.
Phenomenal.
Excellent job.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Maybe we'll get a locust attack next.
That's part of the place. We're past that.
Well, I mean, you sit here,
That's what was biblical on it.
you sit here and we're saying, I'm praying we don't have any more snow, and then all of a sudden, my wife calls me and says, something's going on Lehman Road. I can't get out of the street. I said, really? And then we hear about it. Okay, approval of minutes. What am I gonna do with them? Oh, funding request, I'm sorry. I got it. Okay, these are the minutes of our last Board of Finance meeting, which, if you remember, was a combined Board of Finance meeting and our budget recommendations. So I'll move acceptance of the minutes of the Thursday, March 15, 2018 meeting as presented.
Second.
Any adjustments or corrections?
Very nice job, Karen.
Thank you, Sandy.
A lot of work that night.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Abstained, so I wasn't
Okay,
at the meeting.
Tom will abstain. Approval of minutes. First Selectmen's report.
Thank you, Matt. I just wanted to give you an update from the Board of Selectmen meeting last week. I spoke with the Board of Selectmen about the sadness that we had with gun violence coming to our town. You just think it's going to happen in other places. You don't think it's going to happen here. And we're not used to hearing about these things. And it was kind of sad for everyone. I just, at that time, thanked our outstanding team of first responders, again, EMS, fire, and police. They did a really wonderful job. Right now, major crime investigations, of course, take resources, as Tony just mentioned. So that's why, at this point, we're reluctant a little bit to move money, but hopefully they'll be able to find their money. Related to our budget, my staff had a kickoff meeting on April 3rd with CERC to begin the fiscal health analysis portion of the work that we've contracted for with CERC. And we're hoping that the analysis will continue through June, and they're going to give us some findings and conduct a good discussion with us, with the Board of Selectmen at our July meeting. So I'll keep you posted on that if we get some data, and maybe you guys will come. And then they're going to take our input back and formulate a final report for us, which we should have by August. I think it will be very helpful information for us going forward as to how to perhaps grow our grand list, number one, and number two, to come up with some other initiatives related to our budget next year. I'm going to try to announce this and hope it doesn't change again, because I've probably announced it about 10 times. The microgrid ribbon cutting is now scheduled for May 1st at 11 o'clock, and you will all be receiving invitations.
Already
Wasn't
did.
our fault.
Already got it.
Good.
I already know.
We had the governor kept changing it, and then it was deep issues, and we were all ready. So anyway, hopefully that's it.
Oh, it's not the 7th?
It is May 7th at 11 a.m.
Oh, you said May 1st.
You said May 1st.
Okay, well, TV land, sorry.
That's good,
May
'cause I
7th.
can't make May 1st.
Worked out well.
I already put it in my calendar.
Okay, and just if you hear about it, regarding the dog park, we did get a lot of input. Not that it's a
I saw
real
it.
financial matter, but we did get a lot of input from residents, pro and con. And the Board of Selectmen did approve the concept of a dog park, and now it's our job to decide the where. So stay tuned on that. I can just assure you that at this moment, no town funds are going to be used for construction of the park. We've made it very clear, self-funding. So, and you already know Monday's a preliminary budget hearing, so.
Is it really?
Yeah, I told them, reminded all the
It's that
selectmen,
time
so.
already.
You
The
betcha.
The notice did arrive.
It went very
Good.
quickly.
Good.
So,
Good.
any questions or anything?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, liaison reports. I did not attend the Amity meeting for obvious reasons. I'm a little busy. But obviously the news of Amity is that our superintendent, Chip, is leaving. And that's sad. I think everybody got to get comfortable with him. You experienced him. He's dynamic and
Yes.
very, very much into it. And they did a great job in his years of keeping the budget under control and whatever. So it's an arduous process to replace a superintendent. So I feel for them. I really do. But a lot of good people over there. I think they'll get it done. And
Do you think they'll get it done by the start of the school year?
I don't know. That's
That's going to be really
rapid.
tough. Yeah.
I talked to one member who said that they think they're going to probably look for an interim.
Okay.
There's a lot of retired guys out there who,
Beecher has done that in the past,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
usually with some success. So.
and they usually get a well-seasoned guy, somebody
Yeah.
Right.
who's been
Well, we
through
did that
the.
at
Right.
Amity.
And that way
Yeah.
your
It's
search
been
can
done
kind
before.
of take its time.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that's that. Paul Carrico's, being the conscientious member he is not here, but he sent me his liaison report to read.
Wow.
I'll read it to you.
You can count on me never doing it.
And I got it on
It's not gonna happen.
April 11th, so
Wow.
plenty of time. Hi, Matt, I'll be out of town next week, but since we have had an eventful month, I think it best to brief you on the police commission meeting. We are at 94% of our budget for the fiscal year. The chief reports that the investigation into the murder on Rimmon Road last week will have a significant impact on the police budget. While most of this impact will be from overtime in ISU, some patrol support will be required as well. There are state and federal law enforcement agencies. The town police department needs commit some resources on them. The chief emphasized that this was the most horrific incident in his long tenure in the police department. The chief has begun a mutual aid agreement with the towns of Seymour, Derby, Ansonia, and Orange for traffic safety and accident reconstruction. Such an agreement will allow for more expertise to be brought to bear in these efforts. Additionally, state grants are more readily available in regionalized teams. The first selectman and chief will be at the Seymour PD on the 17th as part of this effort. You there? Okay.
They were.
The department is considering using this strategy for the Detective Bureau as well. Architectural plans have been completed for the police department's carport. The Board of Selectmen have voted to move forward with construction. The department will be upgrading 6 rifles. The existing M16s are military surplus and well in need of replacement. Civil asset forfeiture funds will be used to purchase new weapons. See you in May. Best, Paul. Okay, so that is Paul's report. Tom, you have anything?
No, I've been traveling unfortunately, so I've not been able to get to the things.
Okay.
Hopefully next month.
No problem. Susan?
Fire department meeting is actually Monday.
Okay.
So nothing on, at 6.
Oh, okay.
We're not meeting before
No, 7:30.
preliminary meeting, right?
No,
Okay.
7:30.
But I did get to the library, just a couple things. May is the one book, one town, one book month. It's called The Boys in the Boat. It's about the 1936 rowing Olympic team. Evidently there's some Woodbridge connection with there. I want to let you also know 2 programming issues. One is they're doing some possible cross-programming with the Historical Society, which sounded great. They're also looking to change up their August plans. I'm not going to get ahead of that. But most importantly for the public to know is that new software is going to require a short closure for training for staff. Probably May 2nd in the morning from 10 to 1. So people need to pay attention to library hours in May.
I think it would be helpful if we got that up on the website.
I'll talk to Eric, yeah.
Okay, so it's May 2nd.
He was a little tentative
I'll
back
check,
then, but
and I'll have Sheila check in, or Betsy, and we'll get it up there.
by now it's
Let
probably
the
firmed up.
people know. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'm done.
Sandra?
Okay, as you saw, there is an increasing deficit for the Woodbridge Board of Ed. It is due mostly to increased special education requirements for payment and additional students who need to be taken care of. So again, these are things that are out of their control. They really try their best to kind of keep the students in the Beecher classroom situation, but some students need more specific and different types of environments. So the basically transportation and tuition went up by $14,000. Some of the underspending that they had on the general education side diminished due to some workers' comp issues and a medical leave. So that is really the increase of about $24,000 over last month. So they are not anticipating any further developments at this point, and there are some funds that are supposed to be coming back for 2 out-of-district students that we are seeing here. So we're owed some money from other districts, but they generally don't pay up until the end of the year, and sometimes that may not come in before our close. So we will see. But one of the interesting questions, and I don't know if it was brought up when you had the meeting with the superintendent and the finance director at the school, is whether or not the surplus or the underspending dollars that they've been able to save should be contributed towards the special education fund that will be set up, as opposed to offsetting the overall deficit. So it's not anything that needs to be answered at this point, but I think it's an interesting precedent to try to think about, because then that contributes to increasing the availability of those funds, and then the school is contributing in addition to the town in terms of what they are able to save each year. One other thing is that they were given a list from Medicaid of the free and reduced lunch eligible participants. And there are families who are not signed up for the free or reduced lunch program who will be notified that they're eligible for that. It does not cost the town any more money. And the payment is basically the same in terms of the new system that they use. So when the kids actually go through the line, they just punch in a 4-digit code. And it's in the system who's really covering that. So there's no differentiation. And so this will also be explained to the parents so they don't feel like their children would be singled out for being on that program. So that was very interesting, actually, to Bob Gilbert and to Al Pulo.
Has anybody
So-
quantified the budget impact of that?
So there really isn't a budget. These kids are eating lunch now. I mean,
Right.
it's not like it's going to change the food budget. What do you mean? Maybe
In
I'm not
terms of
understanding.
collection?
Yeah, I mean, if Medicaid is contributing or subsidizing,
Correct.
I mean,
Correct.
it can't amount to that much.
No.
but- Right,
No.
okay, that was my question. All right.
No. And that's it.
Okay. Just as an addition, the review of the $13 million project, HVAC, whatever, is ongoing. It hasn't ended.
Right.
They did discover the problems, why there was a leak and why there was a lack of hot water, but now other things are coming up that they're being looked into as far as the overall design of the project, per Mr. Esposito. So there'll be more coming out on that. It's not over, though, by any means.
Okay.
They're still
Well,
looking.
glad-
into
it's
it.
good they're taking their
They were hoping
time.
to have a report by
Right.
April.
I know, he
and,
told me they wanted to, yeah, but,
Yeah, and,
I will make sure to ask
Yeah.
about that
Yeah.
also at the next finance.
yeah, they're discovering things that we'll be hearing about. One last thing, several people have asked me the question, and maybe I don't understand it as well as I thought I did, and I think maybe you ought to cover it Monday night, Tony, and maybe you can say something now.
Yeah.
They're confused about the difference, why there's two tax rates. Why are we charging 39 mils for the cars? And so, if you could just, you know,
I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you told me that, so I can put it in the
Yeah.
presentation so that I can answer it while we're discussing.
Yeah.
right,
why there's two different.
Last year, the state set a mill rate cap for autos at 32. So if your mill rate is above 32 last year,
Which ours is.
Which ours is. Last year, we had to have one mill rate for autos, which was, in the year we're in right now, which is 32, and there's one mill rate for personal property and real estate, which is, say, 39. This year, or the budget that we're going to be voting on,
They were going to make up the difference.
Right.
which they didn't.
Which they did.
Yeah.
But the reason they did that so it would be the same across the state of Connecticut.
Correct.
It wouldn't
We were gonna get-
matter
So that
where
if you were
lived.
in New Haven and
Right.
you were paying on a mill rate of 70, you were paying, twice as much for your car as you were in, say, Branford, where the mill rate's 20. That was the idea.
Yeah,
It's rational.
it's
Yeah,
a rational
makes sense
idea.
at the time.
And they were supposed to fund us the difference, which they didn't. And so we were at 32 and 39. They raised that cap to 45. So now we're under the cap.
Wait, on autos, they
Yeah.
On
they
autos,
raised it
they
to
raised it.
45.
Yeah,
So now everything's going to be
So now-
39 again.
we're back in line because
Okay,
the cap's 45, and
I
now
got it.
so now our auto rate goes from 32 to 39.
So it looks like we did it. It is probably a good idea to
Yeah.
explain.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
some
but-
confusion.
That's the way we
Right.
operated for
Yeah.
years.
But we were making up the
Same.
difference on the mill rate
For the
for
the
real
prop-
estate anyway.
Correct.
So,
That's correct.
So from a taxpayer's point of
We
view,
win one pocket out and then the
Yeah,
other.
Gotcha.
so for last year, we basically,
You subsidize the auto
we
mill rate.
subsidized it, right.
The auto
We
rate-
covered what the state was supposed to cover.
Correct.
Right.
We subsidize the auto rate with the real estate rate
Right.
last year. Or this year.
But the
We're
issue, of
supposed to
course,
get it, but we didn't.
the issue, of course, is that people who last year, let's say they had a $10,000 car. Last year they paid $320, no, not $320, $42, no, what is it?
No, that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
320.
Their taxes going up
Right.
significantly, and they, well, why? Why can't the
They're
town
gonna
cover
pay
it?
$390.
Well, we did cover it, but yeah, so
Yep.
that's the confusion. People's car taxes.
They're gonna go up
Which you covered correctly.
25%.
So it's going up again this year.
No, if you
Right,
got
so what's it gonna be this year for cars?
the regular
Now they're
mill
the
rate.
same.
Our mill
39
rate.
or whatever the mill rate is.
39.8 or whatever it is.
The last year you paid 32 mils on your car,
Right.
and the town subsidized the
So-
rest. This year we're going.
So conversely, this year, that is one reason why the real estate rate only went up 0.99%.
Yeah.
Because you could pick it up from the
Because
back end.
last year, right, last year we were subsidizing and it went up more than it should have. So this year, we are not subsidizing the autos and it's going up less because of that.
I guess I read the town of Hamden complained and filed a complaint. The state made up a chunk of that money for them.
Oh, they did?
Yeah,
Wow.
because that's a ton of money. It was like 2.1 million that Hamden was short because of that
Wow.
glitch. Sure.
Well, let's write a letter.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
See how far it goes.
So yeah, just bring that up.
I know.
I will. I'll
Because people are going to get their car tax bill and say, "Geez, my car tax went
Yeah.
up." I mean,
Jeez, I thought I paid $400 last
Yeah,
year.
right,
Why am I
right.
paying $600?
Well,
Right.
it sounds like for our purposes, it's become normalized.
yeah.
Correct.
It's a good word.
I'm gonna
It's
add that.
become
Yeah.
normalized.
I like that word.
Okay.
We,
So, yeah.
coming up the budget for next year, now that it's all normalized.
It's
back to the way it
normalized.
used to be.
There can't be many.
And that's true. I mean, that's actually what's
There
happened.
can't be
so.
many towns that have 45 mill rate, is there? I mean, there probably is, I'm thinking about
So
it.
you think the cap is illusory in any event?
Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah, enough people probably complained about it, and they said,
All right.
well, push it up to 45.
Okay, so again, Monday, 7:30, Center Gym.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's not, there's nothing crazy this year. Last year, we had a few items that were crazy, but Board of Ed got all their money, so. Actually, I think I should just make a point, just so people understand. The Board of Ed got their full funding, so if people get up there and start talking about they want more money, they can't. We can't raise a vote request. And, other than that, there really was nothing, I don't think, controversial this year. So.
We're not doing anything beforehand, we're just 7:30.
7:30, yep. Okay, motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor? See you
Sounds good.
Monday.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, guys.